I'm going to be talking to Aline Coutinho, who's a senior research associate at the Smart Prosperity Institute, about a report that came out this week, Just Transition to a Low Carbon Economy, and it was issued by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development to the Parliament of Canada. So welcome to the interview, Aline.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So this, for all of the federal government's talk about its commitment to a just transition, this report was surprising because essentially the commissioner said that the government isn't prepared and it's just trying to do business as usual. And were you a bit surprised by that?
I wouldn't say surprised. I think a lot of us work in this space, we know what's happening. We know that there is this lack of preparedness, but it's always a little bit shocking to actually see in print. So yes, surprised, no, disappointed at some level, yes.
Well, you and a colleague wrote a blog post about the report, and you made three criticisms of it. And the first one is that the federal government lacks an implementation plan, governance structure, and measuring and monitoring systems for a just transition. Essentially, it's almost like there's no policy at all.
Yes. So this didn't come from us. This was the key takeaways from the report. So the report itself says the main finding was that there has been the intention, the will to support those workers that are going to be displaced by this coal phase out, but there is absolutely no plan or governance structure set in place to support them. And when support was made available, they were just recycled supports of programs that were already existing, and they were put in place, they remain in place better to support those workers. But the problem with that is that these programs, they don't address the particular difficulties any structural adjustment that is happening in these communities and the particular challenges faced by these workers. So they tend to underperform and they can have some very serious lasting consequences.
Yeah, that was one of the points that the commissioner made, right? Is that the whatever programs you put in place have to be consistent with the regional context. So a coal community in the Maritimes is different than a coal community in Southern Alberta. And the programs need to be designed for the communities, and that's not happening.
That's it. So another thing that we are trying to bring attention is that not only these programs, the supporting programs, they should be contextualized, they should be place-based, catering to the specific needs of each community. But the way that we we design these programs, they should be informed by the feedback from those workers, from those communities. We don't know, we can only make assumptions on what their needs are, but if we don't depart that from their particular needs and design these programs catering to those needs, again, we will continue failing. We cannot assume that the needs of, Atlantic coastal communities or deep down in Alberta, in the prairies, are the same. It's very complicated, and we will likely underperform if we continue going this path.
Right, and my takeaway on this, Aline, is that let's say that you had an unemployment program. And, because of seasonal employment, it could be maybe in a natural resource industry. And so the workers know, and the community knows that maybe after 3 months, say, of unemployment, then you're going to have 9 months of employment, and the community still, there's a basis for it. But many of these communities grew up around coal, around the mining industry. And if you take that away, that's a real blow. I mean, there is no seasonality anymore. You've basically undercut the local economy. And so that's why the programming has to be different rather than business as usual. Have I got that more or less right?
That's absolutely correct. So the problem is a lot of these communities, they're heavily reliant on coal. The thing is, because we are phasing out the entire economic system that these communities operate with, it's not going to be there. So there won't be a bounce back. There has to be replaced with something else. So this is skills training, for instance, and support, for instance, have to take into consideration, financial assistance have to take into consideration that we are dealing here with a very specific social and economic restructuring. It's not a downturn, it's a permanent, moving out, phasing out an entire economic system that was built on coal. So this transition, it has to go hand in hand with the remaking not only the social fabric, but the economic fabric of those communities.
Well, let's talk about the social fabric for a bit, because the report noted that a number of groups are underrepresented, and there needs to be more of an emphasis on equity for groups that were, not visible, aren't being visibly supported, I guess. Is that correct?
That is correct. So that is something that Smart Prosperity, at Smart Prosperity, we're thinking very hard on it. The thing is, these communities, when we talk about supporting those workers, we tend to only focus on workers. Even though we talk about communities, the focus tends to be placed on workers. And we know that the coal industry is very, very male dominated. The thing is, when we're talking about phasing out coal and changing or shifting the entire economic system of these communities, they're going to have spillover on other, not only just those mostly male workers, but on other members of the community. And that can have spillovers in issues such as gender-based violence. We're talking about this deep economic restructuring that has physical, that has mental health implications as well. So when talking about just transitions, we're really arguing at SPI that we have to understand more in broader terms. We have to understand the entire economic makeup that involves not only formal work, but informal work and domestic work as well, that are mostly performed by women. So when we're talking about providing support to these communities that will no longer find their lifeline in that particular economic system relying on coal, how can we support all of those groups? Not only just the male-dominated coal workers, but other women and indigenous peoples, for instance, that work in coal mines, but also other professions, other occupations as well.
Final question, Aline. There's still just transition public consultations going on that are being conducted by Natural Resources Canada, Minister Jonathan Wilkinson. Are you optimistic that those public consultations will better take into account some of these concerns when they're, developing new programs that come out of those consultations?
I'm not sure. I think, and I'm the one that argues that we have to not only be passive and say, can you just, if you're interested in providing feedback, provide feedback, but we have to go to those communities. We have to refashion the way we bring data that can inform these policies. The whole regulations around just transition. So we have to do some serious qualitative work research with those communities, interview heavily, convene with leaders, social society organizations in this, civil society organizations in these communities. I'm afraid that just putting out there a web link might not reach out to the entirety of the needs of these communities and these workers. So I'm hesitant if you're only going to rely on that. And I'm not saying that this consultation is not important. It's absolutely fundamental, but we might miss some voices. They're not attuned, and even how it works, a consultation such as this one, that remind me some voices and some needs, might overlook some of the needs and data. So that's one of the points that we brought on these discussions that we just released, is we have to re-envision how we develop data and what data is generated and how data is incorporated as well in policymaking.
Well, Aline, thank you very much for your insights. I really appreciate it.
No, it's all my pleasure. Thank you.